I think Jon Ossoff just made himself public enemy number one for Donald Trump. So take a look at this clip from his most recent campaign rally.
And there's something uniquely despicable about lying a nation into war. Treating citizens as fools and those who serve as pawns. Aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, they've now been at sea for 240 plus days without a port call. It's a Navy record. And still they serve with excellence. And still they serve with excellence. God bless the sailors, Marines, aviators, and all aboard the United States ship Abraham Lincoln. See, they don't expect luxury. They'll endure hardship. But they deserve competent leaders who send them into combat only when necessary, and with decisive clarity of purpose, not fools who lie about the purpose and progress of war. And while the sailors on the Lincoln fight his war, while he fruitlessly drains our munitions and oil reserves, the president sleeps through his meetings. He golfs and trades stocks. See, he doesn't want to do the job. He wants to build his ballroom and travel with Natalie on their apparently defenseless flying palace gifted by the Emir of Qatar.
Oh boy, that right there is one way to make some news. So you likely heard Ossoff's reference to Natalie, and something tells me, thanks to that speech, we're going to be hearing a lot more about her. So Natalie Harp is Trump's executive assistant. Technically. In practice, she's become something closer to Trump's shadow. She's the woman who follows him everywhere with a portable printer so he doesn't have to read anything on a screen, God forbid, and that earned her the nickname of the human printer among White House staff. She's been in Trump's orbit since 2022. According to the new book, Regime Change, Harp left Trump gushing notes, including one that says, "You are all that matters to me," and Trump himself acknowledged as much, saying, quote, "All of you will go off and make money. She'll never leave me," referencing Natalie. Now, while the prospect of an affair is widely speculated, given what I just explained, I should be clear that there isn't definitive proof of a relationship. Snopes looked into this and found that the claim is built on anonymous sourcing and speculation, not hard evidence. And even Harp's own estranged brother told the Daily Beast that he doesn't think it's romantic. He thinks it's more of a father figure obsession, which sure is its own special kind of strange, but not the same thing as an affair per se. With that said, Donald Trump doesn't exactly have a solid track record when it comes to being faithful on his wives. This is a guy who is on his third marriage, who apparently openly cheated on his first wife with the woman who became his second wife, who was found liable in civil court for sexually abusing E. Jean Carroll, who paid hush money to a porn star to bury a story right before an election, who was caught on tape bragging about grabbing women without their consent, and who has more than 24 allegations of harassment or sexual assault against him. And now, there is a very persistent rumor about his purported relationship with a young aide half his age that's serious enough that a United States senator referenced it in public. So again, when it comes to plausible deniability, Trump doesn't have much. It's worth noting, too, that this is the same party, the GOP, that has spent decades telling you it's the party of family values, the party of traditional marriage, the party that wanted Bill Clinton impeached over an affair, that built an entire political identity around character, that still can't stop talking about protecting families come every single election cycle. And yet, who did they decide to hitch their entire wagon to? A guy who is now publicly accused of cheating yet again on his wife. Surprise, surprise. And of course, it goes without saying, but if any Democratic president had even a fraction of this resume, right-wing media would be running it as breaking news wall to wall from now until the last ballot is cast. But of course, because it's Trump, the party of family values has decided that the answer is just total silence, total loyalty, and of course, zero self-awareness. But the family values branding was never really about family values. That was a tool to win elections and pass policy that helps millionaires and billionaires. The second that it stopped being useful, the second that Trump became their only path to power, the values got quietly dropped, and the only thing that survived was the branding. And that is par for the course in today's MAGA Republican Party. Shallow branding with nothing under the surface beyond, of course, desperation to consolidate power for the sake of consolidating power. Now, as far as Natalie Harp is concerned, the truth is that Jon Ossoff's point here isn't really about Natalie Harp at all. It's about what Trump is choosing to do with his time while, for example, active duty sailors are stuck on a 9-month deployment fighting a war that he started, which he promised we'd never get into. It's about a president who can't be bothered to sit through his own briefings, but has plenty of energy to build himself a $250 million ballroom, which became $300 million, $350 million, $400 million, $600 million. You get the picture. And of course, a president who has time to fly around in a luxury jet gifted by Qatar. Ossoff isn't gossiping here. He is pointing out that the guy who told the USS Lincoln sailors that their deployment hasn't been nearly long enough apparently has all the time in the world for golf, for stock trades, and joyrides on a plane that a foreign monarchy gave him. It is a microcosm for the fact that Trump's presidency is not about the people Trump promised to help. It is about himself. Need more proof? Ossoff lays it out right here.
And above all, Donald wants to get money. How much have you heard about the president's stock trading? When he first announced the tariffs, you remember that? He called it Liberation Day. And it crashed the markets because it was clown policy. You remember that? Okay, so follow me through on this. He announces the tariffs on April 2nd of last year. The markets tank nonstop for like a week because it's a disastrous trade policy. And 6 days into the crash, April 8th, Trump buys millions in stock. I'm talking Amazon, Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, Berkshire Hathaway. And then the very next morning, April 9th, he posts on Truth Social, quote, "This is a great time to buy." 3 exclamation marks. Okay, now listen to this. 3 hours and 41 minutes after that post, 1 day after he bought millions in stock, he canceled the tariffs and triggered one of the biggest same-day rebound rallies in market history. He's trying to get money. And you saw now he's offering paid subscriptions to presidential announcements, right? Just understand what's for sale here. The sitting president's pronouncements on war and peace and economic policy delivered first to paying customers? What an absolute crook. And speaking of crooks, not a lot of people know this, but Congressman Mike Collins is literally one of the most active crypto traders in the entire Congress, House or Senate.
And remember, if that message is resonating in a state like Georgia, which just a few years ago was as ruby red as the rest of the South, then it's clear that the dam is breaking. It's also clear that Republicans probably miscalculated by putting blind allegiance to Trump over delivering for their own constituents. Because these are the stories that are going to get told every day for the next 3 months. And then after that, every day until the 2028 election. So I hope it was worth it as far as Republicans are concerned. The party of family values hitching their wagon to a cheating predator, the party of fiscal responsibility blowing up the deficit, the party of the Constitution willing to tear it up for an autocrat. They put Trump over everything, and now they're going to have to answer for it. You're watching the No Lie podcast. Next up are my interviews with David Pakman and Brian Poindexter, the Democrat running against scandal-plagued Max Miller. I'm joined now by David Pakman, content creator and the author of the new book, Pay Attention, How the Algorithms and Media Wars are Suppressing Truth and Rewiring Your Brain. David, I want to get into the book in just a moment, but first, there was some big news that broke about how Donald Trump had said that if Republicans have a poor midterm performance, it's going to be on them and not on him at all. He's also refused to come out and really lay his hands on anybody, hug anybody in his administration to anoint them the successor. So he seems perfectly content to kind of marinate in the infighting that takes place within his own party as people scramble to be the heir apparent to the MAGA throne. But as far as him kind of refusing to take any responsibility for what happens to Republicans in this upcoming midterms are concerned, what do you make of that?
Well, it's funny because he wants to do this midterm convention thing, which essentially makes it a referendum on Trump. But if it doesn't go well, then he had nothing to do with it. This, I think,
Wait, so you mean all the credit and none of the blame?
All of the credit, none of the blame.
Who could have possibly guessed?
This goes back to Trump in 2015, as he likes to say, when he came down the golden escalator and said horrible things about Mexican people. He doesn't really care about politics in the sense of finding consensus, getting public policy passed. He just wants the power. He wants the prestige. He wants to decorate the Oval Office. What he really cares about is it going to be onyx or granite in the ballroom,
right,
and this sort of stuff. And so for him, elections are almost an inconvenience, where it's another election where I have to maybe take some hits because my party is going to get blamed for the things I failed to do, the promises I made that I didn't deliver on. And he's looking beyond that. And I think 28 is also interesting because he doesn't really want his successor to do incredibly well. Because think about that. Retired Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Do you think his ego would be pleased if he finds out that his successor is more popular and is getting things done? Of course not. He wants to be able to sit by the pool or whatever he does down there and say, look, my successor is failing because I was uniquely good. I was uniquely special. I'm really the only guy who could do it. Without me, the party is nothing. That's really what he wants.
I mean, isn't there some importance for him in upholding his legacy? I mean, I guess lending itself to that exact point, he sees the necessity of a Republican successor not there to kind of forge their own path, but to uphold his legacy and make sure that what he's doing to Obama and Biden's legacy doesn't happen to him.
Yes.
I mean, that's why he's like, look, he knows he's not going to be celebrated in the aftermath of his presidency. So that's why he needs to rename airports after himself now. That's why he needs to erect monuments to himself now.
Yep.
Because when you look at this stuff, from a clear-eyed perspective with him out of the picture, are you going to erect monuments to a guy who oversaw virtually no growth, watched, inflation surge and started a new war in the Middle East and failed to release the Epstein files despite his own promises, and gas prices are rising and affordability is a bigger problem than when he took office? Like, what is he going to run on other than the fact that he can erect monuments to himself? Like that is what he's doing in this term.
Yeah, and this is why he's increasingly obsessed with stuff that's harder to sign to make it go away, because he knows that whoever comes after him has the ability to undo so much of what he's trying to do with executive orders, etc. If he acquires land, is it Greenland? Is it, he's posted AI slop about Venezuela as the 51st state? What happens with Cuba? That he feels is less reversible. If he builds a ballroom or physically puts massive letters with his name, he sees that stuff as less reversible, and that's all he's obsessed with right now. And to your point, it's so unlikely that whoever succeeds him will say, the reason I'm able to do this is because of Donald Trump who came before me. Of course that's not the case. Trump before whoever is the next Republican nominee will be an impediment to Trump because he's polling 30%.
Right. Do you think that there will be some, reversion to the mean? Or from what you've done, what you've reported on online, have you seen some of the MAGA coalition, which generally, as I said, does revert back to the mean? Are you seeing some of that MAGA coalition actually crumble away? And I ask this with the caveat, that I don't want to fall into the same trap of being like, we've got him now, finally because it always does seem that we've been saying this for years, that people are seeing the extent to which, whether it's Trump 1.0 or 2.0, the extent to which he presents himself as this populist champion. And yet when push comes to shove, this guy has nothing to show for himself other than legislation that offers up tax cuts that disproportionately benefit millionaires and billionaires. But from what you've seen lately, can you give a state of play as far as the Republican or the MAGA coalition is concerned?
For the most part, these are pathetic cowards who need to hold on as long as possible in case being aligned with Trump is still going to be useful for them.
Yeah.
Only if it becomes incontrovertible that they're going to lose unless they go, the Iran war was not exactly my idea. And one of the things I've been telling my audience, because we have some moderate Republicans in our audience, or people who write in and they go, I don't really agree with your views on anything other than I don't like Trump, but I like my senator or I like my member of the House. And what I've been telling them is, it might sound logical to say, I'm a Republican. I don't like Trump, but I like, whoever, Chuck Grassley, as hard that is to imagine, or whoever. The people you are thinking about reelecting as your representatives, even though you don't like Trump, have rubber stamped 92 to 99% of what Trump has done. So we have to do away with this notion of, I'm going to vote for my Republican rep because I like them, but Trump's the problem. Your rep has enabled Trump to do what he has done, and they also need to be voted out.
Right. They are nothing but pure vehicles for his, like, the reality is Donald Trump could be stopped. Like his worst excesses, his abuses could be stopped by those very people who are in place to serve as a check on him. But they've decided to contract all of their power out to the executive branch because they feel like it's more, I don't know, it's easier or better for their reelection, or they're just too scared of garnering a primary challenge from the right, and so they just decide that it's better to stay on his good side, and in turn, as you said, rubber stamp everything he's done. But these people are no different from him. They enable him to be what he is. Without these Republicans in power who have decided, other than Thomas Massie, who, by the way, still votes with Republicans like 91% of the time.
Exactly.
They are just as responsible for this. And I make sure that when I do my coverage of what Trump does, I always point out the fact that it's not just Trump, because there will come a point where the anti-Trump of it all will stop carrying as much weight as it does right now.
Yep.
But I make it clear that it's not just Trump. It's these other people who enable him and embolden him to do what he's doing, because without these obsequious sycophants like Mike Johnson, like everybody in the House, like everybody in the Senate, Trump wouldn't be able to do anything that he's doing right now. He would be stopped from the Iran war. He would be forced to release the Epstein files. These tariffs and the trade war that sent the cost of everything surging wouldn't take place. And yet here we are.
And I think an important point to make is, let's not fall for starting to play coy with the Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Rand Paul. As anti-authoritarians on the left, it's inevitable that you will sometimes come across, hey, the clock is right, the broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah.
Rand Paul will say something about constitutional limits, and we'll go, oh, well, that kind of makes sense. Or Marjorie Taylor Greene will say Trump conned the working class. But these are not our political allies. And it's really important, I think, that we not fall into, these might be people we can actually work with.
Right. The bar is so low that all it takes is like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying one reasonable thing about Donald Trump before people are like, you know what, maybe she's got a point.
Yeah.
Well, that brings me to the book. Again, the book is called Pay Attention: How the Algorithms and Media Wars Are Suppressing Truth and Rewriting Your Brain. So I got to ask, first and foremost, as we discuss all of this stuff, what was the impetus to do this? And I have a good I want to discuss, I think you and me having this discussion from two people who have contracted a lot of their own lives out to the toxic cesspool that is the internet will be interesting for some folks. But why did you think it was important to write this right now?
There are so many people right now who are under the impression that I don't really need to be involved in politics. I don't really care about how these digital platforms work. What I care about is this thing in my local community, or that thing related to my work life or my kid's life or whatever. What people really need to understand is that if you are engaging in these digital platforms on any basis, if you're scrolling TikTok at night or looking at instructional videos on YouTube or whatever the case may be, what you are seeing is directly related to how these algorithms work. And the effect in the political space is massive. And so if you think to yourself, I'm hearing about X, so X must represent what's going on in the political world, you're getting that because these algorithms have identified what is most likely to keep you on the platform. They're not optimized for what is true. They're not optimized for what's best for the working class. These are tailor-made algorithms that are saying, what can I do to keep Brian scrolling on TikTok for another 15 minutes?
Yeah.
This gives a really distorted view of what's happening in the world around us, what we should be asking of our elected officials, how elections work. And this is how people end up siloed, as I call it, where one person is seeing one set of videos, someone else is seeing something completely different, and there's zero shared basis in fact from which we can even come together and go, let's figure out what the best way to deal with housing would be, or healthcare, or whatever.
So do you think that in that respect, because there is a certain type of content that people respond to, and not even necessarily respond affirmatively, but just respond.
That's right.
Whether it's agreement, whether it's rage, whether it's whatever it may be, Does that elevate voices in what you've been able to recover? Does that elevate voices in terms of what you've been able to report on and uncover that are the most extreme?
100%. Just take this example. Vaccines for COVID have killed millions of people. That's one view.
Yeah.
Here's another view. You know, the vaccines are really pretty good at keeping people alive and mostly out of the hospital. But as far as transmission, they're not so good, but certainly they're very safe. We've lost a lot of people already, right?
Yeah.
One of the two things I just said is true. It's the second one. It's the really boring one. Which one is more likely to be shared? Of course, it's the first one. And so when you come to realize that, you start to understand, why is the stuff that's getting shared so much? It's rage, scapegoating, finding a villain, and fear are the most important emotions that trigger virality. And the right has figured out, unfortunately, how to harness a lot of that.
And so in the book, you actually talk about why this kind of the way that our media ecosystem is built, the way that the algorithms are built, actually does favor the right over the left. And so Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, take an issue like, for example, taxes. If the right has come up with, it's your money, you earned it, you should get to keep it, they shouldn't steal it from you. Very emotionally salient, very simple. That's the right's view. It does really well on social media. We on the left aren't going around saying taxes should be 100%. No, we're saying, of course, we would love to keep as much of the money we earn as possible. If we're going to live in a society, you've got to socialize things like the police at least and fire and some. We've already started to lose people.
Again, you're explaining.
I'm explaining. It gets lost in these algorithms. This stuff isn't shareable. So I don't think it's a lost cause, and we certainly shouldn't give up. You know, some people ask me, so are you going to like throw your phone in a pond and then go?
That sounds so nice.
It sounds great, actually. But we would be ceding ground to the worst ideas. And so we can't do that. We have to figure out how to win on these platforms.
And so how do you overcome the structural disadvantage if you are a party for whom, more, I guess, nuanced arguments have to take precedence. It's easier for the right to just say we want to destroy everything in government. We don't need the Department of Education. We don't need the Department of the Interior. Let's eliminate it all. Government should be small enough to drown in a bathtub. Doesn't that sound good to everybody? Your tax dollars shouldn't be going to these bloated institutions. And you're the party that offers up a nuanced argument, a nuanced retort, and you say, actually, we do need these are, there are underserved and underprivileged communities that benefit from the Department of Education being able to step in and uphold these federal standards. That's just one agency, but you can obviously extrapolate that into so many other arguments. How do you overcome the massive structural disadvantage of the algorithms and of the way that the internet prioritizes certain content to be the side that wins?
So there's two things we have to do. Number one, we just have to get better at framing a lot of this stuff. And so, for example, instead of going directly into the nuances of zoning, if we're going to talk about housing, we need to find some emotional core, which is, if you work, you should certainly be able to afford to live in the place where you're working. That's just like, it's a basic starting point.
Right.
And then we kind of fill in the nuance. That's number one. The other thing is, as you and I have talked about, you do have to learn to play the games on these platforms. And what works on podcast is different from what works on YouTube. And what works on YouTube might be different than what's trending on Instagram. And we've got to learn how these systems work. I don't, sometimes people say, wouldn't you rather just have really toned down everything, titles on YouTube, etc.? I would love that. But let me tell you, once I've spent time thinking about researching, recording, and editing a video, I want to do everything I can honestly do, obviously without lying. Everything I can honestly do to get as many eyeballs on that piece of content as possible. If you've got to use emotional titles on YouTube, I think that's just what we have to do.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up. And a lot of people, I know for my audience that is the single most annoying thing that they have to contend with. I'm sure it's the same for every single person in this ecosystem. Whoever is the first to say, I'm going to relinquish these titles and go to just complete straight news titles, will be the first person to see their views plummet. And that's just how it goes, because so long as everybody else in the ecosystem continues to use emotional titles, you are just choosing to either play the game or unilaterally disarm. That's it. Those are the only two options. You aren't going to, I created a second channel called Brian Tyler Cohen News that just uses straight titles for people that want shareable content, for people that are just fed up with any sensational titles. And the number of subscribers is smaller, and the views are a fraction, sometimes like 1% of what the other videos will get.
Yeah.
So, I understand there is a, there's a gulf between, there's a chasm between what people say that they want and really at the same time what people still respond to when they're served certain content.
That's right. And for people who are hearing this and they're saying, listen, I like you guys, I like what you have to say, but I just can't deal with that. There are options for those folks. The long form audio podcast space is outside of this algorithmic system. You have one episode title for the full hour, whatever it is. I say to people, you can exit that. Put it in your headphones when you're at the gym or commuting or walking or whatever. You're not going to see any wild YouTube titles. You're going to get the content. That is still a space that hasn't been touched. Books are a space also where you can sit down with no capital letters or, extreme thumbnail images, and you can just see what my thoughts are about these issues or others. I think that there are still opportunities for that for people who are looking for it.
What was the most striking thing to you while you were writing this book? What was something, obviously having spent so much time in this space, I'm sure you set out to write this feeling like at least you knew everything that you were going to write about. Was there some new discovery that you made even after being in this book, like roughly 20 years, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah. Since I was 4 years old, if you can believe it or not. No. So the thing that surprised me is as I was writing this book, I did do some research into specific areas where these algorithms really sort of changed the course of history. And there's an anecdote in the book about Facebook in Myanmar when there was unrest there.
I thought you were going to talk about like Lincoln, early days of like Lincoln.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Lincoln on TikTok, it was a whole thing. But and one of these things, the things that I learned in looking at the history of how these algorithms can really turn history, at this point, these algorithms are so powerful in influencing what people know about and therefore public opinion that you can foment or end a potential revolution just by what is shared algorithmically on these platforms. Some people may or may not remember, I believe it was in 2023, leading into the 24 election, where Mark Zuckerberg said, after everything crazy that happened in 2020, Facebook will not recommend political content in the lead up to the election. My Facebook traffic dropped 95% when that happened. Yep. And a lot of people wrote to me and they said, this is because of Zuckerberg's personal political views. It may or may not be because of his personal political views, but what it's really about is what is most profitable for these platforms and what will keep people on those platforms. And Zuckerberg decided there's too much heat around a lot of this stuff. I don't want to get sucked into what happened after 2020. Now things have reversed completely. After Zuckerberg and Trump had the meeting of the minds, Zuckerberg said, we might have gone a little too far with the suppression of the political content. We're basically going to turn it back on. All creators in our space now have seen traffic on Facebook go way, way up. Nothing changed about the value of the content. Nothing changed about the truth of the content or the virality of it. It's just an algorithm that can be turned up or down at a whim.
Yeah. There are obviously macro situations like the one that you just discussed, but then when we shrink it down into like how it impacts you personally, I was speaking with Jon Favreau on Offline about this exact phenomenon. And I asked a question because he interviews a lot of people who occupy this political media space, and I asked, is anyone better off, healthier from a mental perspective, from an emotional perspective, being in this space? And he says no, across the board. There is no one that for whom their emotional health or mental health gets better the longer that they stay online. It is solely in one direction. More time online, worse off as far as your mental health is concerned. How do you deal with something like that? Obviously you have an intimate knowledge not only of being in the space, but then kind of like in a meta perspective, studying the very space that you're in. Yeah. So you're able to kind of like see through the looking glass here. But how do you think about occupying a space that you actively know is there to manipulate how you think and give you dopamine hits where there shouldn't be, and just kind of feed off of your rage or your sadness or whatever it may be?
You have to be proactive about your consumption of this content. And if you're basically pulling out the phone or laptop or whatever in any quiet moment and then just spending more time on these platforms than you want to be, you've got to figure out a way out of that. And so what I try to do is just be proactive and say, well, I'm going to look at stuff for 10 or 15 minutes, and then that's going to be it. You're deciding in advance. A lot of people, this happens with TV a lot, where people just get into the habit of the TV is on at certain times of day. You're not really looking for anything specific. You're just kind of, I'm going to be watching TV during this period of time. And then often that amount of time ends up being more than you're thinking of doing. With the phones, it's even easier because the content is tailor-made to you. It's not, well, it's 7:30, so now what's on changes for everybody. Right. It's tailored to you. So you've got to be proactive. I try not to even follow what's happening politically over the weekends. If something huge happens, my team will let me know or something like that. I'm basically saying, I'm recording on weekdays. I'm following this stuff on weekdays. The weekends, I'm going to deliberately take time off from it. And I think you have to be proactive like that. That's the first thing. The other thing I would say is, I don't know. I think that as you go up in consumption hours, there are diminishing returns and then negative returns. You actually are worse off. I do think that there is value to the community aspect of, if you do find like-minded communities, especially for people who don't live in cities and might be isolated politically, especially if you're on the left, the platforms that we're on and the content we put out can give people what is sometimes the only opportunity to engage with like-minded ideas and people. And to the extent that you're controlling your exposure to it and being deliberate, I think it can be positive until it goes over and then starts to become a negative.
Yeah, I find the same thing. You know, the irony of this space is I rely on people being online as much as they can be to consume content. Like that is my whole platform, my financial success. All of that relies on more people being in the space. I absolutely, without a doubt, would recommend that people stay off of these spaces, not consume this content until they are in a state where they feel like they can do it in a healthy way, and then log off. Like, it is more important to have longevity than just to get people on 24 hours a day to consume this stuff in the short term, get these dopamine hits, get those views, get those shares. Like, I have seen... Look, I've seen firsthand the way that it chips away. I've been doing this for about 10 years now, and I should let people know, like, my entrance into this space was from watching your videos. So you know, I think you deserve a lot of credit because you just never know when you're out there making content, like who is watching and what kind of an impact that's going to have. And so you know, on behalf of the last 10 years of what I do, thank you for what you do.
To that point, though, I do think something that is kind of important to think about here is that a lot of the way that these platforms become toxic is when they take control of what you're consuming rather than you taking control. And a lot of people don't realize with most of these platforms, you can go in and say, I want less of this. I want more of that. You can make them work for you rather than blindly sort of working for them. A lot of people don't realize you can do that. Yeah.
No, and I think it's important to do so because even, look, from early days, when I started in like 2016, 2017, I was really good at compartmentalizing this stuff. I would be able to go to work, I think I was writing on Facebook at the time and just starting to get into videos in 2018 because I realized there was not a lot of video content happening. But even in the early days, I was just writing on Facebook back when that was the principal platform. And I was able to do my thing, go to work and kind of like switch my brain off into, okay, I'm at home now. And it slowly kind of leaks into your personal life. I mean, especially when things get so dire, so bleak, so grim, it's hard to turn that part of your brain off and it just chips away at you. You know, and there are always people who very, very kindly let me know how shitty I look on a daily basis. Let me know how tired I look. Let me know that I should get more sleep. And granted, I know that most of them do it from a well-meaning place. And then there's some people that just want to let me know how shitty I look, even if I've gotten a full night of sleep. But I do think it's important. Like, we need people to be kind of in tip-top form as we head toward midterms, as we head toward the 2020 election, because you're no good to the movement if you're just exhausted and burnt out. And look, that's advice that I'm really bad at taking. How have you contended with this idea that I don't care what content creator claims that they don't contend with this, everybody deals with burnout. Yep. And so how do you do that in a job where, you know, look, quick story on that. I wanted to take a weekend off in 2024, in July of 2024. You already know where this is going. Yeah. one weekend, I was like, I'm going to go 48 hours without touching my gear.
Was this the Butler assassination?
This was the
attempt?
Butler.
Okay.
And I was like, I was in the car almost like 90% of the way to Palm Springs from Los Angeles, about 2-hour drive. And I got 100 texts in the course of 2 minutes and nearly drove myself off the road, looked at my phone. All I saw was Trump assassinated.
Oh, is that right? Oh.
Somebody wrote Trump assassinated. And so that's what happened when I tried to take some time off. But how do you deal with a never-ending news cycle?
Yeah.
In a job where you have to cover this stuff or risk, missing a story, losing some relevance, whatever it may be, and yet still having to take care of yourself and your family and keep some piece of yourself, so that you don't just become what I often feel like I am, which is like this content producing machine.
You just have to set some limits. And so for me, it's been like, unless there is a crazy breaking story, I'm not doing content on weekends.
Yeah.
I'm thoughtful about, when I get invites to stuff, I really try to think, is this genuinely worth however many days of travel are required? And just being a little more thoughtful about that. And it's kind of funny because after writing this book, some people said to me, aren't you worried that the book is going to diminish your audience because you're telling people too much of this stuff is kind of toxic? And I'm not worried about that because there are so many people, and relatively so few people actually read books, and these platforms are so addicting and so good that it's like you can give people aren't going to take the medicine, it's at a certain point. So I don't worry about that.
Well, and what I said before about like, we want people in this space to understand some of how to get a look behind the curtain at how some of this stuff is impacting them and their own health, so that they can be in a position where they have some agency, some control over the things that are guiding their viewing habits, their consumption habits, their decisions, so that they can be in this fight longer and not just like watch these algorithms squeeze every bit of rage and fury and joy and whatever it may be out of them in the short term, to the point where, I get lots of emails from people that say, I can't handle it anymore.
Can't do it anymore.
I just need to step back.
I think there's one other important thing to mention in the context of this environment that we're in right now, you just having written your book and me with this one. This media offenders White House thing, where we're listed as liberal lunatics under the broader category of, there's all these categories, media offenders.
I think it's leftist lunatics.
Leftist, what did I say?
Liberal.
Oh, I thought they said, okay, but fine, leftist lunatic. This is having a chilling effect. I've heard from 2 people who said, I'm really interested in this book. I'm worried if I interview you, it's going to pull me into this. And I am worried about what it might mean legally if the White House notices that I'm talking to you about this book. Like, this is how self-censorship works. This is exactly their goal. So we talk about, we don't want to cede the digital platforms to these people, because then the people with the bad ideas are the only ones left. We also don't want to allow the intimidation to take place, because even if technically there's no First Amendment issue with us being on this list, if it chills people's willingness to talk to us, or it makes Amazon say, maybe we won't email anybody about the fact that David or Brian's new books are out, that is a very real impact. And that's just where we are right now.
And I would just recommend for people who are watching right now, grabbing these books and sending them onto the New York Times bestseller list, and making sure to support progressive content creators offers an incentive structure for other people to say, oh, look how successful these books on the left are being. I'm going to take my shot at making sure that I can write my own book, and to perpetuate these ideas. There's a reason that Donald Trump likes to promote every single book about him and Republicans. That's right. Because that gives a huge permission structure for other authors to say, look at what happens when all of these right-wing authors write something. They always make it onto the New York Times bestseller list. They always get their ideas in the zeitgeist. They always get a lot of attention.
And they know that if a random person goes, I might get a book, let's see what's on the list. Right. And they go, right-wing book, right-wing book, right-wing. That is a massive, massive impact on what people buy.
Totally. It incentivizes people to do that. So if you can, right now, I'm going to put a link right here on the screen and also in the post description. If you're listening on the podcast, I'm going to put it on the show notes. Please help David reach the New York Times bestseller list. Give a permission structure, some incentivization for other authors who see this to say that progressive media can still overcome right-wing media. Highly recommend the book. It was an excellent read. And again, a great way to show some support for David as he contends with some pretty heavy-handed tactics at the hands of this White House. So with that said, David, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
We have some major news out of a deep red Republican district in Ohio. That's Ohio's 7th congressional district, where Max Miller, because of all the scandals that he's engaged in right now, is trailing in the polls 39-44. I'm joined right now by Brian Poindexter, who is the Democratic nominee for Ohio's 7th congressional district. So, Brian, thank you for joining me. I have to ask first and foremost, what was your reaction to Max Miller refusing to drop out by the dropout deadline and basically defiantly staying in this race despite, the pretty egregious scandal that he's facing right now?
Well, I didn't really get in this race because, Max Miller is terrible in his personal life. I got into this race because the policies that he supported and the administration has brought forward has made it hard on working families. Whether he stayed in the race, whether they replaced him, we were ready to go with our mission of fighting for working families. That message has really rallied support across the political spectrum, from the far reaches of the Democratic Party, even into the Republican Party and everybody in between, because we're fighting for what I've lived my whole life, working for a living. It's harder to make a living now if you work, and we need to correct that, and I'm hoping to get to Congress to be a voice for working people.
In terms of Max Miller's character, have you spoken to voters who have voted for Max Miller in the past, who have decided that what he is accused of doing, which is to say, there was a report that he had thrown boiling water at his now ex-wife, that he was being accused of breaking the collarbone or injuring the collarbone of his own daughter. Has that resonated with folks in your district?
Well, I've talked to people all across the district, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, and yeah, everybody is shocked and shaken by these allegations. And I've said it over and over again: if they prove to be true, he should absolutely be in jail.
Yeah.
And I think what voters are waking up to, especially in this district, is that there's a two-tier justice system where if you're wealthy and well-connected, you can be alleged to have committed severe atrocities, and it's business as usual. I mean, we see it in the Epstein files. If those were iron workers and plumbers and teachers, they would already been brought to justice. But here we are, years and years and years later, and there's no accountability. And it's not so much a Republican and Democrat issue. It's more of a wealthy and well-connected issue, and then everybody else. And I think it's under a microscope now in this race, and it's under a microscope nationally with the Epstein files.
Quick side note here, as you know, I've been making videos like this for a decade now. I have never paywalled any of my content, I never will, but this is the one time that I'll ask for some support. I'd like to try and hit the New York Times bestseller list this week for my new book, The Day After. If you haven't yet grabbed a copy, please click the link on this screen, in the post description, in the comments, or go to briantylercohen.com/book. I really appreciate it. So talk to me about your district in particular, because I'm especially interested in how the electorate is responding, given the fact that, look, this is an electorate in Ohio's 7th congressional district that has voted for Republicans certainly for my entire career in politics. And so for a lot of people, and I often say this to folks who are running in otherwise red districts or historically red districts, for a lot of people, their political affiliation is intertwined with their identity. And so it's not just as easy as saying, yeah, sure, I may have voted for Republicans in the past, now I'll vote for Democrats. Like, for a lot of people, they are a Republican in the same way that they are Christian, in the same way that they're white or black or Hispanic, whatever it may be. And so how has that kind of manifested itself or presented itself while you've been talking to folks on the campaign trail?
Well, I mean, Ohio traditionally has been a bellwether state, and it's gone red at times and blue at times. The recent past, it's been more red.
Yeah.
And especially like since 2016 when Donald Trump came on scene, he came in on a message of bringing back a golden age for workers. But what people are seeing is, we didn't get that golden age. We got the golden shower instead. And it's harder for people to make a living here under his policies. And I think you're going to see a trend more back towards those we know who are going to fight for workers. Like, we have Sherrod Brown on the ballot. Yeah, Trump won this district by 11 points, but Sherrod Brown would have won this district in 2018, and because he's always had that message of fighting for workers. And that's, this is a very gerrymandered district. They drew it to protect Max Miller and his seat, but they accidentally drew a perfect district for me because I'm right from the heart of the district. I have the blue collar bona fides, being a 19-year member of the Ironworkers Local 17, being a family man. I'm a girl dad through and through. And I am representative of this district. And what a concept to be representative of the district you're running to represent. My opponent, Max Miller, he just dumped $1 million into his campaign to try to buy his way out of his troubles. And that's so out of touch with people here in this district. Me, I don't have $1 million laying around. Most people in this district don't have $1 million laying around. And it just goes to show that he doesn't know what we're going through. He can afford his votes in Congress. We can't. And that's why I'm going to win in this race.
What is your pitch to folks in that district? I mean, you mentioned that you're a member of the Iron Workers, and so for working class Americans, for blue collar workers, for union members, what is your priority? What do you want to bring to your district and to the country more broadly?
You summed it up right there. It is, I want to bring the voice of working people to the halls of Congress. We are one of the most underrepresented demographics, people who work for a living in Washington. I mean, we have plenty of lawyers there. We have plenty of, elites in Washington. We need more people from the working class who knows what people are going through to stand up and be a voice. Anything that comes across my desk in Congress, I'm going to be looking at it from the perspective of a worker. And, I didn't read about the issues of workers in a book. I learned about it by having to juggle the bills. I learned about it by trying to get one kid to practice and one from swimming lessons. I learned about it by wearing the different hats, the iron worker by day, the father in the evening, and the nurturer, when they're going to bed. That's where I learned my policy platform from the everyday life and the everyday, lived experience that the average person in this district lives under.
Talk to me about a conversation that you've had with a voter, maybe a Democratic voter, maybe an independent or even a Republican, that stuck with you.
To pick one out of the thousands is kind of hard. One that sticks out in particular, down in Ashland County. Ashland County is very rural. It's formerly Jim Jordan's district. It's newly drawn to this district. And so I wanted, early on in the race, even before the primary, I wanted to, introduce myself to the folks in Ashland County. And so I go to a meeting down there. It was at the Machinist Union Hall right in Ashland. And I didn't think I was going to know anybody there. I'm being, just going to be myself, introduce myself. And I get there before the meeting. I have that blue collar work ethic. I show up everywhere early, and I'm waiting for people to come in, greeting them as they come in. And this old timer comes up to me, got his walking cane. He's like, "Brian, you remember me?" And I'm like, "I remember the face. I can't remember the name." It was a guy, Dave, that I worked with on a construction site about 10 years earlier. He's like, "Brother, I'm so happy that you're here. We need people like you in Washington. We need somebody who knows how to do work and knows how to bring people together and knows what we're fighting for." And that right there set the tone for my whole campaign. That told me that I was on the right track. I was doing the right thing, and people are very excited that I'm in the race.
What did people of Ohio expect when they not only voted for Trump, but voted for full Republican control? I mean, they sent Republicans to the Senate, they sent Republicans to the House, they sent Republicans to the White House. And so what did they expect? And then what are conditions actually like on the ground in your district?
Yeah, people expected a boom. We expected manufacturing to come flooding back to America. Especially this area. I remember growing up in the '80s. We were a beacon of manufacturing. We are the manufacturing center of the world.
Yeah,
so to speak. In the '80s, you could go from one job to the next in the same day, and we were told that we were going to flourish, and we were going to be making more money than ever, and people's lives were going to be significantly easier. And no, that none of that happened. Manufacturing is down right now. Wages have stagnated, costs are up, and now we're in a reckless war. And the tariffs have driven things up, and people in my entire life, me included, I worked paycheck to paycheck almost my whole life. Maybe I have a little extra to save, but now people aren't even making it to the next paycheck. And it's really hard, when gas goes up to $4. I just filled up yesterday, it was $4.23 a gallon. Um, that hits the wallet pretty hard when you're already not making it to the next paycheck.
Right.
And like ground beef, a pound of ground beef was $8.50 a pound. I mean, I know people who are working in grocery stores and in retail that are making $8.50 an hour. They got to work a whole hour for 1 pound of ground beef.
Yeah.
And it's just unrealistic. And then you hear things like, oh, they want to raise Social Security age to 70 years old. Like, I'm an iron worker. How could I be up on the high steel at 70 years old welding and walking around? It's just unrealistic. Anybody who suggests that is so out of touch, and they don't belong in the halls of Congress.
What would your message be to voters who had voted for Max Miller the previous time, who are now up for grabs? What would be your message to them?
My message would be the message that we've been running on since day one. I'm not in this for partisan politics. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. I want to fight for working families. If you work for a living, if you're not the boss, I'm going to fight for you. I mean, the bosses, they have the power and ability to fight for themselves. They have the wealth. They can fight for themselves. We need somebody who's going to be a champion for workers, and that's what I want to be. And I tell people when I go to Democratic clubs and stuff, we are the welcoming party, right? Democrats, we welcome people in. We need to make sure that we are not shaming people for who they voted for. We're more than who we voted for. You might have seen things a little bit differently 2 years ago or 4 years ago, but we always have the ability to learn from what we do and always be willing to welcome people in when they want to jump on board. And that's what we're doing in this race.
Brian, for those who are looking to support your campaign, where can they go?
They can check out our website at poindexterforcongress.com. You can read about my backstory. You can watch our videos. I got to admit, though, most of our cool clips are on social media. So if you look up Brian Poindexter for Congress on any social media platform, you'll find us. Help us out in any way you can.
Great. I'm going to put a link to your website right here on the screen and also in the post description. For those who are listening on the podcast, I'm going to put it in the show notes. Thank you for taking the time today. Best of luck in the campaign trail.
No, Brian, thanks for having me. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, and keep up your good work, buddy.
Thank you. To listen to the audio version of this episode, click the link right here on the screen to subscribe. And of course, to see more video content, that subscribe button's on the screen as well.